Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. To introduce my guest, let me just read the email I got from my guest. My name is Amy. She thanks me for being a listener of the podcast and helped her. I am graduating in 3 weeks from BYU, and now that we're recording, that's happened. Amy graduated a couple weeks ago. And I'm getting married in June to my fiancée, Melanie. I came out as bisexual while at BYU and feel I have some unique experience to share on how I still navigating my faith, sexuality, and then just wonders if I could be on the podcast. And when I get an email like that, listeners, I'm just so grateful that someone had the courage to find my email. It's in the podcast notes if you're wondering where my email is. That's how you can find my email and just reach out and want to share her story. Anyway, welcome to the podcast, Amy. I'm going to get your name right. Thelin.
Thelin, yep. You got it.
Tell us how to spell both your names and how to pronounce your second name that I just kind of botched.
My first name is simple, A-M-Y, 3 letters, but last name is Thelin, and it's Thelin, like how you feeling, sister Thelin.
I love that. How you feeling? Amy graduated in human development, as I mentioned, from BYU, and her next step is a master's of social work, and she's applying to schools on the East Coast where she's from, and she wants to be a therapist. And I love therapists. My therapist really helps me, and I've grown to see the impact and importance of therapists. She served a mission in some place I'd love to go, listeners, someday. It's one of those missions that is very romanticized, I think, in the minds of a lot of people, French Polynesia and Tahiti, if I got that right, and also has been an MTC teacher. And she's marrying a woman. Melanie, your fiancée, is a woman, so that's what she felt is her best path. And we said a prayer before we started, and I just prayed for upcoming marriage, that it'll be a beautiful day for Amy and Melanie, and that they will feel love and acceptance with their friends, family. And I think Amy's going to talk a little about, kind of like Charlie Bird and Ryan have tried to do, is attend church as a couple in a same-sex marriage. And those of you that do that are super brave and super pioneers and super trailblazers, and not really sure how that's going to work out because you don't even know what ward you're going to live in, I assume. But anyway, I'm just grateful for Amy to be on the podcast. We hope this is helpful for you if you're a queer Latter-day Saint, if you're a local leader, a parent, just wanting to hear someone's story. And we just pray that, ideas and thoughts will come to you that'll be helpful to you in your journey. Is that okay for an introduction, Amy?
That was perfect, Richard. Thank you so much.
And just thanks for serving a mission, teaching the MTC, and all the good you've done to build Zion. And, listeners, when I hear someone's going to same-sex marriage, just walk with them and don't judge them and say, I'm not going to make you the hero one day and the villain the next day. You're the same great, woman who's done so much good and will continue to do so much good. Anyway, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. I really liked how you said I'm just the same person that's been serving, and I want to continue to serve the Lord. And that's going to look different as I move into my marriage. But that's my goal, is to serve the Lord. And I always want to be close to Him. And just for everyone that's listening to the podcast, my goal and my prayer is that you'll feel some peace and love and comfort and understanding of LGBTQ plus people, and that you can feel Christ's love through me and through those around you. So yeah, like Richard introduced me, I'm from Virginia, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So I've got 4 older siblings, and they're all married, and they are my best friends. We are a super tight-knit family, and we grew up in the middle of the woods, so we're 30 minutes from a grocery store, 30 minutes from a school, 30 minutes from everything. And we're just kind of in the middle of a forest. So when we wanted to hang out with people, we just hung out with each other. We just run out into our 5 acres of woods, and we're just always running around playing with each other. So I just want to express I'm very privileged. I have a great family who loves me, and that's been a big part of my coming out journey. Um, Growing up in school and in high school, I didn't always feel connected to church. I've always been a pretty big ally. I mean, since middle school, I just have always loved people, and so I had some gay friends, and really loved them. I didn't really have any members of the church in my school, just a few, a handful of them. Um, and I was always just kind of a feminist and progressive, and so I sometimes was disillusioned by the church and their policies, and so I wasn't super connected, but I appreciated it, and I appreciated just growing up with these great values and my family instilled in me. But then I decided to go to Utah for my freshman year of school, which was 2020. I was a COVID graduate kid, and as I went to Utah, I went to UVU, and it was really good. I was just surprised by the Utah culture, but I was really surprised by just so many good people that I met. There's just a light in a light in so many people that I met that had served in missions, and they were telling me about their missions, and I was just so surprised that people had such great experiences with the church, and how it really changed them. And so that year, my roommate actually was reading the Book of Mormon, and she invited me to read it with her, and I kind of picked it up for the first time and read it with a sincere heart, and I didn't even make it all the way through it. I was kind of bored of the first few chapters because I felt like I'd gone over that so many times as a kid. And so when it was Thanksgiving break, I was at home in Virginia, and I remember being up in my room, and I just was like, I want to read the scriptures, but I don't want to read the beginning. So I just flipped to the last page, the last chapter of the Book of Mormon. And we all kind of know maybe Moroni 3 through 5. Um, ask with a sincere heart if these things be true. And, I was baffled by that scripture, and I prayed, and I really felt God's love. And I just really felt like his presence was with me. And I just kind of opened my eyes and I said, whoa, God is real. And that like moment sincerely changed my life forever. Um, I I went up to my parents the next day and I was like, guys, I think I want to serve a mission, which I'd never talked about that. And I was kind of against serving missions. I thought I was going to go into like the Peace Corps maybe, but not for the LDS church. And so I was like, I want to serve a mission and I want to serve God. And I all I know is that he's real. And so then I prepared for a mission, and a couple months later I got called to French Polynesia, Tahiti. Was shocked. I had no idea where that was, and found out I'd be speaking French and Tahitian, and so two languages, and yeah, it was a lot. Um, but I started my mission in August. I did 10 weeks of online MTC and a couple months in Louisiana, which I loved because of COVID, and then I was at in Tahiti for the rest of it. And I'm sharing this part of my mission experience because of how important and foundational it is to my testimony of God and Jesus Christ and his atonement and the gospel of Jesus Christ. I can't express to you how simple everything seemed on my mission and how connected I felt to the Lord and how much love I gained. I just felt like I had so much love in my body, I couldn't handle it sometimes. The Tahitian people are the most loving people I've ever met in my life. They embrace you with everything they have. And I saw miracles upon miracles, and I didn't take a day of my mission for granted. And I had a testimony journal, and I wrote every single commandment and policy down. And then
Wow.
for each one, I, I don't know if I wrote every policy down, but definitely every single commandment that was in Preach My Gospel, and all of the plan of salvation and the law of chastity and everything, word of wisdom. And I fasted and I prayed over every single one on my mission. And I wrote my testimony under it when I felt like I had gained a testimony. And so I wanted to come out feeling so solid and so sure of the church that nothing would ever shake that. Um, the last day of my mission I guess last day I was in Tahiti, my parents picked me up. I remember just looking at this blue water and these tropical trees and can see all these people. And I was like, how am I going to leave this place? What am I going to do? And I just had this distinct impression, never deny the fact that God loves you. God loves you so much. He sent you here and he is with you forever. Christ walked in with you and he walks out with you. And I've really held those experiences close to me. So anyways, I got back in 2023 and I started working at the MTC and was teaching both French and Tahitian in the MTC to districts and districts of missionaries. I think I've taught over probably a little around 200 missionaries in the MTC, and I loved it. And yeah, I just felt so many strengthening experiences. But in 2024, um, around June or July, I I started to be honest with myself about my sexuality. I kind of always describe it to people as it was a box on the shelf in my mind. And my brain is pretty much very good at compartmentalizing. So I had this box on my shelf that sometimes the lid would come off, but I'd close it so quickly that I barely noticed it. And I think that's what happened my whole life is the lid comes up and I closed it so fast. And um, there was just one day in June or July, and I just described it as the box literally fell off the shelf and broke open, and so bad I couldn't put it back together. I didn't know how to put the lid back on because there was nothing left. It was all just out. And I just felt like I was really confronting everything at once. And it was really difficult for me. Um, I had a couple close friends who were gay, and they were so helpful. My supervisor at the NTC was actually gay, and he was a huge support to me. And he, referenced this podcast to me and other podcasts and books. And um, the biggest thing I felt was, things were suddenly not black and white. And because I'm a verbal processor and I'm pretty extroverted, I told a lot of my friends and family, I was just trying to reach out to people and talk about, what's going on? How do I wrestle with this? Oh, if I didn't mention, I came out as bisexual. So I kind of feel like I could hide my sexuality pretty well throughout my life because I liked men and I've been going on dates with men. But I grappled with my sexuality of coming out as bisexual. So, anyways, that that summer of 2024 was difficult for me. Um, and something I forgot to mention too is when I got back from my mission, I transferred to BYU. I had felt a really distinct impression to transfer to BYU. I was on a run on BYU campus after I got home from my mission. God said in my mind, you need to be here. And so I applied and I got in. So here I am after a year at BYU and serving the MTC, and I just came out as bisexual to myself. And I felt like I was really grasping at straws. And I I had a friend visiting from my hometown, who's not part of our faith, and I wanted to come out to her, and it was kind of my first moment of coming out to someone outside of my family or close friends here. And honestly, it didn't go well at all. I I felt rejected and so sad afterwards, and it was really awkward. And that kind of messed me up in terms of coming out sometimes. I just always thinking, well, if that friend didn't accept me, then who could? When you get your first rejection, it's just, nothing's changed about me, but I just shared this little piece of myself and not even sure what to do with it. And um, I felt, yeah, so hurt. And so going into my that fall semester at BYU with all that, just happening in the summer, I was kind of a wreck mentally. And this is just to go out to people to take care of themselves. If you're someone who avoid your feelings through busyness. That's what I do is I fill my schedule with everything I can to not think about or feel what all the big things. And so if you're someone that avoids your feelings through busyness, take time and schedule time to feel. My friend and I instated self-care September that year, and we, instead of going out to fun parties and doing cool things, we just sat home sometimes and just watched movies and, journaled. It was really good for me. And I feel like that's where I started to kind of reconnect with the Lord. I went to the temple after coming out, and I was in, the celestial room, a special room in the temple, and I was just praying to God, and I said, God, if this is true about myself, please use me at some point. I want to, all I want to do is serve you. That's been my whole like goal in life. And since my mission, I just promised to serve you. Um, and so I thought about, as September rolled in and I was kind of grappling with just coming out. It's such a bizarre experience. Kind of feels like I've kind of felt like an adolescent again. There's the gay adolescence period, and I just kind of felt like, you know, I felt excited about thinking about girls and maybe dating them, but then I was like, that's not okay, and that's wrong, and how am I gonna navigate that? Um, and I went to the temple in September, and I was just thinking, maybe I would like to try, going on a date with a girl, but I'm also at BYU and that's not okay. And I just got this distinct impression from God. Dating girls is important for you right now. And I was so confused by that. It again, that just didn't fit into the black and white simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ that I understood. I was just seeing this from a whole different perspective. And I said, well, I was talking back to God. I said, well, what about the temple and how do I navigate all of this? And these scriptures, I just opened the scriptures and I found these scriptures. I think they're really important. Mark 12:28. And one of the scribes came and asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like this, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. And to love him with all the heart, with all the understanding, with all the soul, with all the strength, and to love his neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered discreetly, he said unto him, thou art not far from the kingdom of God. And that was a huge moment for me. God telling me how important love is. Just love is all encompassing, and loving God is above all things, and that's above all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices is loving God. And loving God can look different for so many people. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice a ton of things. There are sacrifices to be made, but we can really love I can love God with all my soul and still marry a woman. And that really touched me, and I knew I could be close to the kingdom of God as long as I stayed close to the Lord and loved him. Um, so honestly, not shortly after September, I met Melanie, and we really hit it off, and we were so excited, and I was so excited about all these feelings I had for her, and I was also just confused. How could I be feeling these feelings for a girl? But I'm just so excited, and I just love her, and we really fell in love, and then I kind of got into this. Things only got harder from there. It's 2025, and now I'm at BYU, and for those who don't know, there's a policy at BYU that same-sex dating is not allowed, and they kind of make it sound a little scary, like you could be kicked out for dating someone of your same sex. And that was really confusing for me because the church policy is different. You can date someone of your same sex, and you can also attend the temple
Hmm.
and be at church and sacrament, and you're fine. But the church, which is also, I mean, the BYU, which is also run by general authorities, has a different policy. And I just, you know, part of me felt like I was lying being at BYU, but part of me was like, you know, I've always not liked things that were unfair, and this is unfair. This feels like an injustice, um, in a lot of ways, and I don't know what to do with it. And so that semester, I was in a religion class, and we were talking about sexuality, um, in religion class, and I was hurt by some of the things the professor said. And so I decided to talk to him after class. And I went to his office, and we had a 45-minute long conversation. And I came out to him and I told him, I really, I'm okay right now. Like, I have a really strong testimony of this church, but the things that you said and the way you're representing the church was going to hurt other queer people. And I really believe that queer people are being driven away in droves from the church. And I just don't think that's right. And he was a pretty good listener. But he kind of spent a really good long time lecturing me about why it's so important that men and women be married. And he spent a really long time explaining that to me. And he basically told me that he was kind, and he said that, I was brave and that I had a really great spirit. And he basically told me that I needed to walk a lonely path ahead of me, and that I, in doing so, would be more like Christ in walking that path. And I think that conversation really broke me down. It it came back to me often throughout classes. It's very traumatic because I really just wanted to advocate for other people, but instead, he was assuming stuff about me, and also just assuming that I could never marry a woman, and that I just needed to walk a path ahead of me that was lonely. And I was already dating Melanie at that point. And, it's funny, most of the time, the only response I ever want to hear from somebody is, it's okay for you to be here, no matter if you're, what your sexuality is, who you're married to. I just want to say here, it's okay for you to be in this church. And I don't really think I often hear that. um, so as I continued at BYU, it got harder, but I also was grateful, and I have a really love-hate relationship with BYU because I'm not all hateful. I really think that the professors at BYU are phenomenal, and that they are so kind and so loving, and I felt so strengthened by them. But at the same time, um, I felt hurt that this institution that was professing so many things wasn't really walking the walk. And one of my hardest classes was actually my social work class, my intro to social work class. I really loved it, but we talked a lot about discrimination, institutional discrimination, and what that looks like, and and how that's not like how we need to advocate as social workers to take down that institutional discrimination. And I just sat there and was like, but this is it. Like, I'm at BYU, and here it is. I can't publicly date and love the person I want to. And if I did, I'll get kicked out, and I'm gonna lose part of my degree, and it wasn't worth it to transfer at that point. I'm just right at the end. And so I just had to live in absolute fear that I might get kicked out of BYU. And I love the social work program at BYU, the master's program, but I just had this feeling I knew I wouldn't be able to attend that. I could attend in secret right now, BYU, but if I got married, I can't attend that master's program. And just blatantly feeling that and was has been so difficult, and has really kind of muddled my experience at BYU. And I just overall, it was hard to not be my authentic self. I'm very outgoing person and friendly, and I love talking to people. And there's this experience. I remember one time I was sitting at the Iron Science Center, and I grabbed some lunch, and there's a girl sitting there, and I just sat down at the table with her, and we just started talking. And she was um, really nice. And, I started getting some texts, and I said, "Oh, what's going on?" And she was like, "Well, I have this boy I really like, and I need some help, and I like figuring out how to talk to him." And I was just chatting with her, and she's like, "Oh, so are you dating anyone?" And I just kind of swallowed hard and was like, "No, I'm not." And I just constantly had to do that, where I just wanted to connect with someone authentically, and I just had to say no, because people told me there's a lot of reasons to be scared. And I heard a lot of stories. Oh, this person got reported, or this person didn't, like, this person got expelled, and all these things. And I just couldn't risk that completely. um and it's one thing being out, but it's another thing dating someone. So I could come out to people, but just not that I was dating someone. And so a lot of my friends and mission friends and missionaries, they actually don't know that I am getting married. And so I'll be coming out soon publicly. But um it's not that I didn't want to. It's just that it was more of a self-preservation to not tell everybody. I couldn't make an announcement, and I didn't really feel like coming out publicly as just bisexual either. I did to my ward once about a year ago. I gave a talk, and I came out, and that was a really enlightening experience. But um, yeah, those are some of my experiences at BYU. And just overall, the most of my classes, because they're human development, we talked about sexuality. And I'm gonna be honest, every time we had a class about sexuality, I would go home crying, and I cried for a couple hours. And so my experiences were really fraught with, you know, learning so much and being so happy, and then having this kind of oppressive, sad thing. And just for everyone at BYU who is queer, and I'm just sorry that we have to be scared. And I don't think that's right. And I hope that changes. And I hope that the BYU's policies can align with the policies of the church. Um, and I really want to give a shout out to my bishops, though. My bishops were really great. I imagine they were kind of like Papa Osler when he was a bishop. They were really great. They listened to me, and they allowed me to be at BYU, and they knew I was dating Melanie, and I really appreciate that about them. And so they saw me for who I was trying to be, and the disciple of Christ that I want to be. Um, I just have a couple more thoughts just about um, now I'm graduated BYU, and I'm kind of moving forward, and I'm getting married on June 12th to Melanie, and we are so excited. Um, but there's not only been hard parts about being at BYU, but about hard parts about being in the church. And just we feel that a lot of assumptions are made about us. If you see two girls holding hands in the street, your first thought is not going to be, "Oh, they are active LDS members." That's just not your first thought. A lot of people assume that we're out of the church, or that we are just more in the world, and we actually just still want to be at church because we love our faith. And I've had so much cognitive dissonance about how to navigate my faith and sexuality. And I'm going to be honest, I just don't have answers for everything. And that's been the hardest part. And I really feel like faith is filling in the cracks of what I don't know. And that I'm getting more and more comfortable of living in the gray space. I have loved the temple, and I go there. I've tried to go there every week in the last few years, and it's just been my favorite thing. And knowing that I won't be able to attend the temple after I get married is heart-wrenching. And I actually spent all day crying about it yesterday. um, and I don't know how to navigate that completely. Um, and there's just parts of worship that I can hold on to, and there's just parts that I can't. And I have to recognize that as grief, and I'm gonna lose things that matter to me. And my faith means everything. But how I've kind of kept moving forward is I just really feel Christ's hand in mine. And for a while, I had this image in my head, and it was a path with Melanie standing in front of it and a path with God standing in front of it. And I was like, how am I supposed to choose? How am I supposed to choose? I love Melanie, and how am I supposed to choose to go in between? But I've kind of reframed that thought process, and now I see Melanie, me, and Christ connecting God in between us, and that we can walk down a path that's kind of in the middle, and it's not perfect and it's not clearly laid out for us. But I feel like they are walking with us. And, most of the time I've been in the church, I feel like I'm holding on to sand. I feel like there's sand in my fingers, and as I hold on more tightly, I feel like particles are slipping through my fingers. And I don't know how to keep it all in my hand. Um, and there's just parts that I can't. And that is, yeah, that grieves me so much. Um, but I do believe I'm choosing a partner who teaches me to be more like Christ and embody Him. And something that I feel strongly is that I'll never stop trying to be like Jesus. And I hope that the church provides a space for us to be like Jesus and to sit comfortably in its rows. We want to be there as long as the church allows us to, because that's where we feel like we worship Christ best. And some people feel like they worship Christ best in another faith or outside of the LDS church, and I can completely understand that. But there's just too much that I know and I can't deny, and I feel too strongly about so many things that I really want to be in church. And it is kind of pioneering it forward, and we don't know what kind of bishop we're going to get or anything, but we do believe that Christ is going to hold us. And it's the last thing I want to say is I was doing a personal study the other week, and I was thinking about my social work class and about the word equity. And I I love the word equity. Equity is the quality of being fair and just, especially in a way that takes account of and seeks to address existing inequalities. Um, there's a lot of examples of equity just in society. Equity such as putting like a handicap ramp up, allowing people to have access to the same things, but it might be from a different vantage point. And so I was flipping through the scriptures, and I read Psalms 98:9. Before the Lord, for he cometh to judge the earth, with righteousness shall he judge the world, and the people with equity. And I didn't think about the quality of God having the quality equity, and it actually shows up um, dozens of times in the scripture, the word equity, and being connected with God. And I just believe Jesus Christ is our advocate, and Christ sees that we're all starting in different points in life. I can't help that I'm bisexual, and God made me this way, but he understands it, and he can see me with equity and judge me with equity. And I'm just so grateful for the people who have not tried to solve our problems for us, but instead have ministered to us and held us in our journey of faith. And we just know that answers are not going to be found for us. But as long as people show us that there's a place with them and with God, then we feel safer. I I've read all the talks, I've read all the things that I know it all. I know it all, and yet I'm still moving forward comfortably and so happy marrying Melanie. And um we really just pray that Christ holds us. And I believe Jesus Christ is the author of everything good in me. And there's so much good to be found in queer people and in all people, and we need to continue to see that.
Amy, thank you so much. I would wish I could come through the Zoom screen and just give you a big hug. You know, we start these podcasts kind of on a high level, and then my heart just, my tears flow and my heart just breaks. And I really admire you sharing your story and walking us in the complexity of the road you walk. And my fix-it side of me wants to fix this, and I can't. And so what I do is just, try to love you and honor you, and like other people in your life, just help you and let you know you're not alone, and I trust you, and all the things that I think of to say. Just a couple, listeners, I've written down 6 or 7 things that really popped out to me. The first thing I want to just mention is I went to women's conference yesterday at BYU. My wife spoke. Her topic was supporting adult children that leave the church, and she did a great job. And we have kids out of the church, but the prayer was offered in the women's conference, terrific prayer for her session, Expand the Circle. And I thought a lot of queer Latter-day Saints. No one, right now, we're not saying, let's expand the circle to help queer members feel welcome. We're not quite saying that anywhere in the church, but I hope we learn to do that. And I hope that wonderful people like Amy and all my other queer friends feel they're inside the circle, and we're doing everything we can to love and support them. And so I just have hope, but I recognize you're still really alone. Let's see if I can read my writing. Avoid my feelings through busyness. That was a pretty good phrase, Amy. I think that's pretty thoughtful phrase, and I think we all do that, and I think it's better. Being busy is great, and I think at some point we all need to, really address the reality of our lives, whatever that is. And even if that shatters the box, I think it makes the rest of our future possible. I love the common theme of prayer, temple attendance, celestial room, and personal revelation. Please use this, if it's true about myself, to bless others. I love that you looked at your sexuality, and one of your prayers in your heart was, please use this to help me bless others. That is a great insight into your heart, and just your decision to return to the church to serve a mission is out of love for other people. The 200 MTC missionaries you've taught is out of love to help those men and women be better people and better missionaries. And I love that you're looking at your sexuality in the same lens. And I believe if you came on this podcast in 20 years, you would help us understand why that hope and prayer and impression has become a reality. I love your personal revelation. If I get all this right, dating girls is good for you. And 10 years ago, I probably would have said, Amy, you need to pray again to get a different revelation that's more consistent with church teachings. And what I've done, listeners, I've just learned that it's not my job to judge anybody else's personal revelation. Personal revelation is personal revelation. And my job is to walk with people and accept the personal revelation they're receiving for their story. And even if it's different than general church teachings or my personal preferences for your path, I've just learned to let all that go. It's kind of relieving. And so when Amy tells me something like that, I just accept it. And I'll just say, I'll walk with you and I trust you. And this is between you and your heavenly parents and the Savior, and I'm just going to love you. Then you fell in love with Melanie, and I just think that's wonderful. Um, and I just believe that we're not meant to be here alone. Yeah, you talk about something that's really a real thing. There's a BYU dating policy, and then generally, and this isn't true, as some of my guests have said, most bishops adopt what I'd call the straight dating policy, that you can date, you can hold hands, you can kiss, you just can't break the law of chastity. So gay people have the same rules that straight people have, and that happens in some situations, but BYU is different. Any affection, holding hands, is against BYU policy. So that creates some bishop roulette in the world, where some bishops adopt the BYU policy and some bishops adopt sort of, we'll give you the same rules as straight members. So I wish the church had a consistent policy for everybody, whether a church school or not. And so that's one of my hopes for the future. And you've had to kind of navigate that. Then I love you talking about the BYU professor experience. I think when we know better, we do better. So this is a safe place to tell difficult experiences. And I sense, and so I love that you had the courage to talk to him about being queer, and just walked in that space for 45 minutes in real vulnerability. I agree with you that queer people are being driven away in droves. That's my experience. That's the research I've seen, is a lot of people are leaving the church, but the percent of queer people leaving the church is higher than the percent of straight people. And data is our friend to say, what can we do to address that? What can we do to make people like Amy feel welcome? I like one of the things he said, he talked about the importance of men and women being married, and I'd agree with that. That's awesome. And nobody here is trying to, take that off the table. It's sort of, what do queer people do? And I just think this invitation to walk a path of loneliness, and that's what Jesus wants you to do, is church teachings. I wouldn't take that off the table. But it's just a really hard ask. And I look back in church, I don't want to, I think we do better when we just say, I trust you, Amy. I'll walk with you. These are the church teachings. You've got to figure out this road for yourself. It's going to be you and the Savior at the end of your life to judge your life. And I'm just going to walk with you. I think you're a walking encyclopedia on church teachings. So I recognize a BYU professor may have a responsibility to sort of reflect BYU teachings. That I don't know. It's a really hard ask. And there's a little bit of what some would say spiritual manipulation in there, is that, that this is what Jesus wants you to do. And I just think that's a really tender subject, listeners. I think for queer people, we have to point them to Jesus, but not sort of say, this is what you should do. It's tough, because if you're a leader in the church, you need to reflect church teachings. But it's just complicated. I'm going to stop right there. I've got some more, but I've gone on for a while. I want you to see if there's anything you want to say on anything I've said, or particularly that BYU professor interaction.
Yeah. With the BYU professor interaction, yeah, I agree with you that, like, it was hard because he was coming at it as if I disagreed with a lot of the things he said, but I actually really believe in the family proclamation to the world, and I really, believe that it is important for man and woman to be married. Um, but there is just kind of always the what about me? The what else? Like, when we don't fit under the umbrella of all the things, and someone standing outside of it, then what? Then what do you say? And if your only solution is you need to walk this path of loneliness, that isn't a solution that fits everybody and isn't the healthiest thing for everybody. And I think I came away feeling kind of just not very heard, not listened to. And I think that's what I love about this podcast. It's listen, learn, and love, right? And we need to listen and learn from people, and then just love them. We don't have to offer advice or policies towards everyone that shares something. Because I really I don't have a lot of qualms about those things. It's just what about queer people? You know, we don't get mentioned when I don't try to take everything that's being said at General Conference as a personal attack to me. I really working on that. You know, if we're talking about the Family Proclamation of the World, I'm not saying, oh, well, that means that my marriage is bad, but I'm just saying I don't feel included in this right now. And that doesn't mean that they're saying my marriage is negative or invalid or God hates me. They're just saying this is important, and I agree, but there is that gray space around it of, but where do we fit in, and then we're hardly addressed in a church setting.
For sure. Well said. And Jacob Guy came on the podcast and I saw him at a gather event. He talked about, I feel like I'm on the porch of a home and there's windows open and I look in and there's all these couples in straight marriages with the proclamation hanging in the background, and they're really happy and I'm really happy for them and I really would love to make that work. But I go to the door and I can't unlock it. The key I have doesn't unlock it, and it's just really painful. And so, eventually the blinds come down and people don't really want to understand that I'm out here on the porch and how complicated it is. It causes dissidence for them and pain for them. And I thought that was super helpful for me to understand. I love visual imagery, and my heart just broke for Jacob, breaks for you, Amy. And even if we ask you to walk this path, this lonely path, and some do, I wish there were more support. We have no support for you. We have no representation for you. There's not women that are out as bisexual 20 years ahead of you or 30 years ahead of you talking in church meetings or even general officers of the church. There's no support group. So if we really are serious about that, I wish we had, and I wish we talked and said, we're asking queer people, gay, and I'm using that as a real umbrella term. Let's just call gay and lesbian and bisexual people to be alone. Let's talk about what we're really asking them to do. We're not asking single straight people to do that because they still have hope that they can find companionship. You're locked out of hope you'll ever share your life with anybody for the next 7 decades, Amy. And I just cry saying that out loud, that's your path of being alone because you're a follower of Jesus. And if we really are serious about that, we need to recognize what a big ask that is and then develop support and empathy and and some people, one guy talked to me, says, some people feel called to this path. Ben Shalati might be an example of that. He really feels called to be celibate. A Catholic priest might be called, and there's even this celibacy, this vow of celibacy that's celebrated in that religion. There's nothing like that for you, Amy. It's just, we're going to be inside the house happily married, and so that helps me understand just how difficult this road is, this path of loneliness. And just the thing I've said before, the inference that if, you go with Melanie and get married, that somehow Jesus is going to be part of your life and you're turning your back on Jesus. And I don't think that's really in our theology. Our theology is Jesus loves all of his children, wants to be in all of their lives. Our heavenly parents love all their children. It's outside of church teaching, so I won't take that off the table, but it's not outside of Jesus's love for you and our heavenly parents' love for you and your ability to continue to have a wonderful, powerful relationship with all of them. Anything more on that before we go on?
I don't think so.
The other thing I like to think about is just I wish I could take away the pain. I just wish, I was back to women's conference because I walked with my 93-year-old mom to the car, and I haven't been on BYU campus for a while, but there's just all these couples holding hands, and I thought that was great. But then I thought of my queer BYU friends that can't even do that. And I mourned for them, and I just recognize it's a double bind. Bryce Cook talked to me in an early podcast listeners about his gay sons, and he says they're in a double bind. that our straight members don't face because they really want to follow God and really want to fully participate in the church, and they want to spend their life with somebody. And you have found Melanie, this beautiful companion of you that seems to represent all the things we look for in our companion. And you just lit, I wish everybody could see you just lit up. Melanie, if you're listening, when Amy talked about you, her face was just beaming. And I just thought, isn't it wonderful you found each other? You can share your life together, but you have to trade off something you love and believe in so much. And then I think of the temple. You love the temple. And you love the chance to fully participate in the church. You're obviously a gifted teacher, and you have a powerful story of coming back to the church and wanting to serve a mission out of love for others. And both of those things end for you. And I'm just so sorry. We're worse off because your voice, we won't be able to hear your voice in typical church settings, at least current policy. You can't attend the temple. And I'm just so sorry. We're worse off because your voice is muted or whatever vocabulary there. And then I like your invitation is, your invitation to all of us is you just want to feel it's okay to be here. What a simple thing you're asking us all to do is for you and Melanie just to find a space in the church, an award somewhere where you get in a master's program, and you just feel from the ward leadership and the ward members, just okay to be here. That's all you've asked. You haven't asked for the church to change doctrine or policy. You haven't asked to be able to attend the temple after your marriage. You've just asked, it's just okay to be here. And I just hope and pray that happens for you and all our crew members. I believe at the congregation level, everybody should feel welcome. I hear general conference talk about everybody should feel welcome. Everybody should feel a sense of belonging. We don't then go one step further and say, how should we treat a couple in a same-sex marriage walking into church for the first time? I wish our leaders would say, this is what we should do. And so what the members of that ward have been taught to do ahead of time as you walk in for the first time. Because right now there's a lot of different responses you could receive, and a lot of different bishops, they may respond differently. And then if you don't feel that way, you might feel your best path is no longer to attend. And then we may blame you for that you're not very faithful and I just am sorry for all the things you face. Okay, listeners, now you've got me crying. And I thought about grief. Sometimes it's a real public grief that people understand, that they can really fully minister to you and sit with you. And, a health diagnosis or a loss of a loved one. But then there's kind of this hidden grief, and maybe a therapist has a better term for it, this grief that you feel. And it's largely masked from everybody. When you walk out on campus or when you walk around, people don't know this. And so I'm glad you shared it on the podcast a little bit. But grieving is a normal human emotion, and not being able to process your grief in a safe place is probably really not healthy. And so I hope and pray that, there's probably good people in your life that are doing this, but I hope as a church we can better process the grief of queer members. Because I think that's a part of ministering and a part of discipleship and part of Christ. I hope your marriage, this is the other thing I wrote down, I hope your marriage to Melanie is the best day of your life. Send me a picture someday in June, the two of you. I just hope it's the best day of your life. It should be. Anybody's marriage, I think, should be the best day of their life. And I'm glad you found each other. And I just assume I'll see a picture if you send me one of you two holding hands and smiling, and you'll just look great. And I'm glad you found each other. And you've done this in a really thoughtful, intentional way. This isn't out of anger, rebellion. This is just, I'm wanting to do the best I can. Now I'll turn it back to you for more thoughts.
You got me crying too, but I wanted to express too that just I appreciate your authenticity and your kindness, and really people like you give Melanie and I so much hope that we can press forward and navigate our way through the church. Um, I something I didn't touch on as much is just how I hold grief and joy at the same time, and I'm really working on that. Um, I have been talking about it in therapy, and I just how do I do both? Like, I'm just so excited and so happy to marry Melanie and make her my partner for life, and we're excited, and yet there's this whole part of me inside of me that just grieves the future that I really want in my church. You know, on my mission, I just always pictured myself like as a teacher in the church forever. I love teaching, and I've always, yeah, and I love being a leader. Leadership, it just kind of comes a little bit more naturally to me, and I really want to be a leader in the church. That's just my whole like aspiration is just to help people in that setting, and so there's just a part of me that's crestfalling, and the part of me that's just feels so much joy. You know, some people say, well, how do you not just choose one? You know, how do you not just reject the church, or how do you not just reject Melanie? And I really am walking a tightrope, and the only way that I am doing it is with Jesus Christ. I think there's there's a part in Preach My Gospel that I really love, and it talks about the atonement. It says, everything that is unfair about this life will be made right through the atonement of Jesus Christ, and I believe that. I believe that the unfairness and the sadness and the grief can be held and healed through Jesus Christ. And you know, I didn't mention this either, but I'm bisexual, and so I've also heard, well, you're one of the lucky ones. You're bisexual. You're attracted to both men and women. Like, what? Well, you chose Melanie. How are you doing this? And I've held that space too in my mind of these conflicting futures, right? This one future where I see everything working out in the way that I expected in the church, and the simple path to eternity, and then the other where church is way more ambiguous for me. Um, Yet I fell in love with Melanie, and how do I can't let that go. I don't know, even though there's this path where yes, things really could work out for me, and maybe I could find a man to marry. I fell in love with Melanie, and I choose this life with her, and I choose myself and with her, and I want to move forward with her, and God has put a lot of peace in my heart about that. And I finally have come to the realization that maybe God didn't want me to walk the easier path. And as strange as that sounds, is that's the right path, and that's the path we're all supposed to choose. Somehow this path is different, and maybe there's more to learn on that path with Melanie. And there's more people I can help on that path, picking them up along the way, um, in the position I'll be in church than what I thought would have happened. And yeah, I just really want to leave it to, queer listeners, that it's up to you, and it's up to your faith and your journey, and how you feel with God and the people you love around you.
Thank you, Amy. We've got the neighbor's lawnmower going in the background. Sorry, listeners. Once a
I knew.
week, they mow their lawn. So, but that was just great. Amy Thelin, Thielen, Amy
You got it.
Thelin. I did it the
Yep.
second time. You're great. And I think you're just brave and authentic and so faithful. And you're going to be okay. And God loves you. And I think I think you have a great life ahead of you. And thanks for your courage to, out of love, reach out to our listeners to help expand the borders of Zion. You're Israel. We need to do a better job of gathering Israel like you, and because we're better off with you and your contribution. So I hope for better days. But in the meantime, you need to get on with your life. And you've fallen in love with Amy. And there shouldn't, and I recognize, I love you kind of readdressing being bisexual. And some would say, well, you should try to fall in love with the man. But we'd never say that if you just fell in love with a man, that you should because there's something, you should still maybe fall in love with a different man. We just, once someone falls in love, we just usually embrace that and support that and not sort of try to, invite you to end that relationship for something different. So I just think it's great you fall in love with Melanie, and it sounds awesome that you're toured together and you've got building a life together, and here you are off to want to get in a master's program for social work. And that is not a high paying, cushy lifestyle job. That is a job that is going to bless a lot of people, takes a lot of emotional capital. You're willing to go through more school, the clinical work you need to do because of your heart, just wanting to help people. And I think you are a really good teacher and you're a leader, and our church is better off with you. So I hope and pray that, we can help, that our queer members are able to fully participate in the church one day. I'm open to changes or policy or doctrine. I try not to advocate for that or go campaign for that, but I pray for that because there's just so much pain. When I see pain, to me, it's our friend to understand things that need to be addressed within our church so that everybody feels welcome and everybody doesn't feel pain as they come to church. So anyway, you have a great life ahead of you. You're awesome. Check out the show notes for any contact information that Amy wants to put in. We'll put in whatever she wants. Sometimes people add their email or their social media in case people want to reach out to you. Anything you want to say in closing?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for providing this platform to be able to share my story. I just really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So this is Amy Thelin and Richard Osler signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.